The biggest lessons I've learned in my life are here. Through different topics, I'm going to inspire and motivate you to reach your success and your dreams. I'm so grateful that you're here on Journey to Success. So let's enjoy my next episode together. Hey Terry, thank you for being here to share your fascinating story about Acral, Lentiginous, Melanoma, and your journey in overcoming it. How are you doing, by the way, and how are you?
I'm great, Fabio. Thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to talking with you today.
Okay, that's perfect. And well, just because I like to be fair with my community, it is the second time we started because I had some connection problem. And thank you for your patience, first of all.
You're welcome.
All right. So, Terry, let's divide your life into three parts. All right. So the first part is where I'm really curious about your life before discovering this fact, basically. Okay, this condition that you had. The second part is when you discovered the melanoma. And the last part is what you are currently doing and how you are succeeding. Okay.
Yeah, so my life before melanoma. I am the oldest of three boys. You can't tell this from looking at me or from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall. And I actually went to college on a basketball scholarship. When I graduated from college, I moved home to find a job. This was long before the internet was available. I'm really dating myself now, but this was long before the internet was available to help people find employment. Fortunately, I found that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, a hamburger chain, in their marketing department. Unfortunately, I lived with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mother care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer.
Right.
Professionally, as I said, started out at Wendy's, became a hospital administrator after that, then made a major pivot in my life and became a police officer. And part of what I did in my law enforcement career was that I was a SWAT team hostage negotiator. After that, I started a school security consulting business, coached girls high school basketball, became an author in 2020. But for the last 11 years, as you mentioned, I've been battling this rare form of cancer. So I guess that's my life before cancer. I don't know if you have any questions about that.
Well, I'm actually curious about the story of the SWAT department. I know that maybe thousands of people ask you for that, but it's so particular and rare to talk with someone who was inside. So how was it? And also, how did you transition into that role after being customer service manager? Like, it's very, it's very far from it.
It really is. And that's a great question. I was a customer service manager for an academic publishing company, and I had an opportunity to go into law enforcement. And it was something that my grandfather did. My grandfather was a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954. And he was actually shot in the line of duty with his own gun. It was not a serious injury. He was shot in the ankle. But my dad always remembered the stories of that my grandmother told. My dad was an infant at the time, of the knock on the door of, Mrs. Tucker, grab your son, come with us. Your husband's been shot. So when I expressed an interest in going into law enforcement, my father was absolutely not. You're going to go to college. You're going to major in business. You're going to get out, get a great job, get married, have 2.4 kids, and live happily ever after. But that's what my dad wanted me to do. That's not what I felt my purpose in life was. So I had a choice when I graduated. I could have said, sorry, Dad, I'm going to go blaze my own trail and go into law enforcement. Or out of love and respect for you, I will do what you want me to do and go into business. So understanding the backstory, my resume looks a little bit makes a little bit more sense after that. And so when I had an opportunity to get into law enforcement, I was a police officer for 5 years before I got on the SWAT team. And really, there was just an opening, and I applied for it. and I had to do, physical fitness. I had to run. I had to do push-ups and sit-ups. I had to meet with the psychologist. I had to take psychological exams. And then I had to meet with the team. And it was kind of an all or nothing situation where if everybody on the team didn't say yes that they wanted me on, then you didn't get on. So I was lucky enough to have everybody give me a positive vote. And that started my almost 4 years of being a hostage negotiator.
I mean, a hostage department. Like, you have such profound and kind voice, but I think that voice can be also scary, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm 6'8". I'm about 230 pounds, so I'm a pretty big presence. But
yeah,
you can always be nice until there's a time when you don't have to be nice. So,
all right, and there is something that you remember hardly in a positive and negative way of this story, like when you used to ask a question to someone and they didn't give you the correct answer. So can you tell me a positive story and negative story, something that touch you in both ways?
Sure. So I'll give you a funny story.
Right.
It's certainly positive, but it almost never went this way. When we start negotiating with a person, what we're trying to do is develop trust, to develop a relationship with that person who we've never met before, who obviously is probably having the worst day of their life. But this situation was a little strange. I got to the scene and I asked the officers on the scene what the deal was. And they said, well, this guy is drunk. He has barricaded himself in his house with a gun and he's using his wife as a hostage. And I said, do you have him on the phone? I said, yes, we do. So I took over the conversation and we were talking for a while. And usually it was hours down the road before you started to discuss the possibility of how the person would come out. But I just had a feeling about this guy. And so I asked him, I said, what would it take for you to come out right now? And there was a long pause. And he said to me, give me a beer. And I was like, oh, what? I said, if I gave you a beer, do I have your word that you would come out? He said, do I have your word I could drink it? I said, you have my word you can drink it, but do I have your word that you'd let your wife go and come out? He said, you have my word. So I gave $5 to one of the officers. I told him to get out of the store, buy a beer. The tactical team put it on the front porch, and I called him back. And I said, your beer's on the front porch, but you don't get it until your wife comes out, and you come out with your hands up. All of a sudden, the front door swings open, and here comes his wife. And then here he comes with his hands up. We handcuff him, let him drink his beer, and off to jail he went. So
no way, I don't believe it.
Yeah,
I think also the wife at that time, I think, just look at him like, seriously.
Yeah, it's like, what? Really? I mean, did we really need to? Your house is surrounded by the police, and
I could buy for you a lot of beers.
Yeah, really, for a beer? I mean, really? It's like, this was not worth you going to jail over, over something like that. So that was the funny story. The more serious, the more unfortunately sad story was an individual who decided he wanted to commit suicide, and this started about 8:00 at night, and he slit his wrists, and that didn't work. And so for some reason, he got this idea of turning the gas on in the oven, in the stove, in his kitchen, and putting his head in the oven. Well, that didn't work either. And then he called a relative, and the relative called the police, and we were involved. And it's probably 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning now, and he's barricaded in his house, and he has a gun. And finally, he says to me, Terry, I just want to come out. I'm tired. It's been a long day. I want to come out. I'm like, yeah, do that. Just put the gun down, come out. I'll come down to the scene with you, and we'll talk face to face. And he said, yeah, I'd really like that. So I said, don't hang up the phone, though. Bring the phone with you. Well, he ends up hanging up the phone, which is not uncommon because a lot of times when we end a conversation, we're conditioned to hang up the phone. All of a sudden, probably 20 seconds later, one of the tactical officers who was around the house said, we heard a gunshot. And I thought, no, you did not shoot yourself. He did. Shot himself in the head, but he shot himself at such an angle that the bullet went in right about his temple, underneath his skin, went around his scalp, round his
Great.
skull and came out the other side. Never penetrated his skull, never got to his brain. A very bloody wound, because most head
Yeah.
wounds are very bloody, but not a very serious wound. So I think this was a perfect example of somebody who God was like, you know what? It's not your time yet, and I don't care how hard you try. You're not going to die today. So he ended up going to the hospital, and then after that, he ended up going to jail.
Wow, 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 wow. It's great. Great story, both of them, actually. And when did you discover about your melanoma? Was during your job in the SWAT department or
No,
or
I
not?
had left law enforcement. I had a school security consulting business that I had developed, and I was also a girls' high school basketball coach. And actually, the melanoma I found when during one of my times coaching, I had a callus break open on the bottom of my foot, right below my third toe. And initially, I didn't think much of it, Fabio. I was like, okay, you're on your feet a lot as a coach, so this is probably no big deal.
Could be
But after a
something
couple of
from the
weeks,
skin or something, I don't
yeah,
know,
exactly, yeah,
you know,
I mean, you're
yeah.
on your feet. So this is probably, I wasn't really a young man. I was in my 50s, but I have this and it doesn't heal. And so eventually, a couple of weeks later, I made an appointment to see a podiatrist, a foot doctor friend of
Mhm.
mine. And he took an x ray and he said, Terry, I think you have a cyst in there and I can cut it out. And he did. And he showed it to me. It was just a little gelatin sac with some white fat in it, no dark spots, no blood, nothing that gave either one of us concern. But fortunately or unfortunately, he sent it off to pathology to have it looked at. And then 2 weeks later, I received the call from him. And as I mentioned, he was a friend of mine. And the more difficulty he was explaining to me what was going on, the more frightened I was becoming until finally he just laid it out for me. He said, Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years. I have never seen this form of cancer. You have a rare form of melanoma, as you mentioned, acral lentiginous melanoma, that appears on the bottom of the feet or the palms of the hands.
Well, I think of course, was a shock.
A huge shock. Absolutely. I think I went through all the stages, I guess, that we would associate with grief.
Yeah.
First it was denial. I can't possibly have cancer. I've done everything right in my life. I've eaten right. I exercise. I go to the doctor every year for a physical. I've done everything right. And then you get mad. It's like, I've done everything right. How can I possibly, have cancer? And then I was sort of bargaining with God. Our daughter was in high school at the time, and it was just let me live long enough to see our daughter graduate from high school. And then I got a little down, a little depressed. And then I just got to a point where it was like, you know what? This is terrible. This is lousy. This is not what I expected, but I've been dealt these cards and I'm going to have to play these cards to the best of my ability. And at the time, they told me I would be lucky to live a couple of years. And it's been 11 years now that I've been battling this disease.
It's part of you, basically. But somehow, somehow the doctors looks like it's not the doctor. The medicine sometimes make some assumption about it, but evidently in your case it wasn't true. I mean, they say to you that you would have lived only a couple of years, but you are here, and I don't know, call like whatever you like, maybe God, universe, law of attraction, energy, whatever, but you are here and you are against what all the people say to you, all the doctors say to you. This is just a miracle, I think, at the end.
It really is. I mean, when I was diagnosed, all they had to treat me was surgery. So it's basically like we can try to cut it out. And they certainly did. But they also, my doctor put me on a weekly injection of a drug. It was not a cancer drug. It's a drug called interferon. It's a lot of times used for people who have hepatitis to get rid of the hepatitis in their liver. But they were going to try this and see if it worked. And The side effects of the interferon for me were that it gave me severe flu-like symptoms for 2 to 3 days every week after each injection. And I took those weekly injections for almost 5 years. So imagine having the flu every week for 5 years. And as I said, that was not a cure. That was, as my doctor used to say, we're trying to kick the can down the road and buy you more time for drugs and therapies to be developed to help you. So I have gotten to that point. I mean, I have been availed some good drugs that have helped me. But like I said, at the time, those drugs weren't available and weren't something that was even an option for me.
Wow. But did they do any surgery then with you, with your foot, or?
They did. They cut the tumor out of the bottom of my foot. They also cut out all the lymph nodes in my left groin because they had done a study and found that one of the lymph nodes had a microscopic amount of cancer in it. So as a precaution, they recommended that I have all the lymph nodes removed. And so I did that. And, you know, the last, I don't know, since 2018, I had my foot amputated. And then during the pandemic in 2020, I had my left leg amputated above the knee.
I cannot imagine how much painful in maybe not even in a physical way, because of course they took care about it, right? But I mean, in a mindset way, how much painful can be to not see anymore something that has been with you for all your life, you know? Like, I cannot imagine. Before we go through, if you're enjoying this podcast, please consider taking just 3 seconds to share it with someone else. It is a small gesture that could make a big difference in someone's day. Now, sit back and enjoy the rest of the episode.
Yeah, it was, excuse me, it certainly has been, you know, when you have something amputated, and I've never, in all honesty, you know, growing up, friends, high school, college, things like that, I've never known an amputee. I've never known anybody that has had a body part amputated. And so, you know, first it was my foot, and then there was the whole learning how to walk again. And then the cancer worked its way up my leg. And eventually, you know, it got to the point where I had an undiagnosed tumor, for lack of a better word, kind of in my ankle area, my lower, excuse me, the lower part of my leg, that grew large enough that it fractured my tibia, my shin bone.
Yeah.
And as I said, you know, this was during COVID. And my doctor actually had to get special permission to do the surgery. My wife literally dropped me off at the hospital the morning of the operation. I was not allowed to have anyone with me. I mean, talk about scary and spooky. You know, you're in this big room that's usually used as a pre-op room to get people ready for surgery. And I was the only one in there. You know, there was nobody else around. And I was supposed to be in the hospital after the amputation for 10 days to 2 weeks to learn how to, you know, to function without having a leg. And I was in the hospital for 48 hours because of COVID and then sent home. So it was definitely an interesting time, a time where, you know, there was a lot of unknowns and how we were going to get through this. But, you know, that was 3 years ago and we survived it. So I guess I was very lucky.
Well, yes. And you have a big smile, a big energy. So my question is, how much strong do you feel? I'm not going to ask you if you feel strong, because you clearly are, but like how much powerful you need, because I can feel it, that you feel very strong about it. And you're right to be, honestly, because you went through a lot, and you are here, you talk with energy way, strong way. It's this strong, positive way that you talk is actually what the people need, you know?
Yeah.
a bunch of people who have right now cancer, who discover something very bad, and you are here, you talk with them, and they have to understand that, yeah, that it's more than hope or miracle. It's just that's who you are. If you are like in this strong way and in this energetic way, like you feel just indestructible. That's what I think.
I feel purposeful, I guess, for lack
Purposeful
of a
is
better word.
beautiful word. Yeah.
Yeah. And Winston Churchill, the former prime minister of Great Britain during World War II, used to say that if you're going through hell, keep going.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way I feel. I remember when I had my leg amputated, I also found out I had these tumors in my lungs, which I'm still being treated for even today. And I remember my doctor showed me my imaging, my CAT scan, and I have no medical background. I don't know how to read a CAT scan, but you can kind of look at it and be like, well, that doesn't look like it belongs there. And I had these big tumors in each of my lungs, and I had fluid around the pleural spaces, sort of on the outside of my lungs. And I remember looking at my oncologist and saying, how was I alive? Looking at these scans. And he kind of got this smile on his face and sort of shook his head and said, I don't know how you were alive, because you shouldn't have been. Which says to me that I have a fairly strong faith that God's not done with me, that I have a purpose, that I'm supposed to use my illness, my infirmity to realize, to help people realize that there's so much more that they can do, no matter how down, no matter how depressed, no matter how physically in pain, they are. We limit ourselves. We quit. We give up long before we ever should. Fabio, don't get me wrong. I think we all have a breaking point. But
Yeah,
that
of
breaking
course.
point, I think, is so much further down the road than we ever give ourselves credit for.
Yeah. Man, there is a point where you have just to fight, I guess, and you are fighting very well. So yeah, that's what I think. But there are no symptoms at the end. Like you just saw this black black thing, but you didn't feel anything, no pain, nothing at that time.
For when I originally was diagnosed, you mean?
Yeah.
No, I didn't. I just had this callus break open. I mean, initially it wasn't painful. Eventually there was some pain associated, but yeah, I had no idea. As I mentioned,
Yeah.
my dad was dying of cancer when I graduated from college, and I made a conscious decision then that I would do, everything I could to avoid that. I would eat right, I would exercise, I would get enough rest, I would see my doctor every year for a physical and all that. So, and it's funny, about 3-4 years ago, I had all 88 genes, genetic testing done on all the genes that the doctors know, or either know or suspect cause every form of cancer that we're aware of. And I have absolutely no mutations in any of my genes, which begs the question, then how or why did I get this rare form of cancer, which nobody's ever been able to answer? So I don't spend a
Yeah.
lot of time worrying about the fact that I have cancer. I do, but I spend more time thinking about and working on bettering myself and using my illness, my infirmary to make other people's lives better.
Yeah. And wow, it's an impactful story, honestly. And how can I say? It's only the fact that you are here talking to me. For me, it's more than miracle. And I think I don't know. I think evidently God has a plan with you, because otherwise I don't get it.
Yeah,
Truly.
I don't get it either. And there
So
are many times where, I should have died along the way. I ended up
yeah.
in the emergency room with a fever of 108 degrees, which is usually not compatible with being alive. I mean, you're at that temperature, at that body temperature, you're cooking your organs. your brain and your
Yeah.
lungs and your liver. But I survived that. I survived a blood clot in my lung and fluid around the sac of my heart. And so, like I said, I don't spend a lot of time worrying about death, worrying about dying. When I die, where I die, how I die, way above my pay grade. Don't spend a lot of time worrying about that. Spend more time trying to make a difference in people's lives,
Yes.
and I think I guess the way I've come to understand this is, when we get into life, when we go to school and then we get out of school and we get into life, whatever we end up doing, whatever that ends up looking like for us. And we seem to think that we're born empty. And that when we get into life, our job is to fill ourselves up. I want to get a good education. I want to get a good job, drive a nice car, have a good family, have nice children, all that stuff. We fill ourselves up. But Fabio, what I've come to understand is that it's just the opposite. We're not born empty. We're born full. Everything we need to be successful in life is already inside us. We just need to find it and pull it out and use it to our benefit. So our job is not to fill ourselves up. Our job should be to empty ourselves out for the betterment, certainly of ourselves, but of our family, of our community, of our God, whatever you believe. And if you look at life that way, instead of what can I get, it should be more what can I give? And by giving of yourself, I think your life is more profound, it's more fulfilled, it's something that you feel you're making a difference in the lives of other people with.
Wow, is truly one of the most beautiful phrases I hear. Like truly, it's very, very powerful. I totally believe it.
Thank you.
Totally believe it. Yeah, because we used to dedicate our time to feel ourselves, but actually maybe the reason why we are here in this world is because we have to serve someone for a better purpose.
Yeah, I think Mother Teresa once said, God never asked us to be successful. He asked us to be faithful. And I love that quote.
Yeah. And listen, beautiful interview, by the way. I love it.
Thank you.
Well, let's go to the last part of your story. Just a question before to go, because I'm actually curious about something. The melanoma, this kind of melanoma, is it curable? Yes or not, Terry?
Is it curable?
Let's not look your case, because you already are a miracle, all right? But I mean, generally, is it curable? Yes or not? Or tell me something about it. I'm sure that you studied all these years, to understand if it's if exists a cure or not.
It used to be absolutely a death sentence. They didn't have anything for it. They are developing drugs now, and I am on one of these drugs that I guess to understand the way cancer works in your body, any kind of cancer, is that it secretes a protein or an enzyme that hides itself from your immune system. And what these new types of drugs are doing is they go into your body, they do nothing to the cancer, but they wipe out that protein or that enzyme so that your own immune system can say, just like a cold virus or an infection, hey, wait a minute, that doesn't belong here. We need to attack that.
Yeah, don't sleep.
And that's what's happening to me. So these new set of drugs are helping your body to fight the disease. And they're called biologic medications. But normally, I'll be honest with you, I'm on a trial drug, a clinical trial. I started with two other people. Those two people, unfortunately, both had melanoma and both have passed away. So is it curable? Maybe, but it's very deadly. So, use sunscreen, try to stay out of the sun, do those things because you do not want to get melanoma.
Gotcha. And, but going back to you and to this beautiful conversation, because we have not to forget that you had the energy and the power, to be here with us. So my last question is, what are you currently doing and how you are succeeding right now? So you say to me before that evidently your life had a purpose, right? So I guess you are doing something then to make this go true, basically.
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about our purpose, to find our purpose in
Yeah.
life. And I think we limit ourselves when we say purpose in the singular.
Hmm.
I think looking back on my life, I've had purposes, plural. In other words, when I was younger, I felt my purpose was to be an athlete, to play sports. And then when I finished that, my purpose was to be in law enforcement and try to serve in that capacity. And now, with cancer and more than likely coming to the end of my life, I feel my purpose is to put as much goodness, as much positivity, as much motivation back into the world as I possibly can. And, I do that different ways. I made the brilliant business decision. I say that sort of tongue in cheek, that to start a motivational speaking business right as COVID hit. And so, like so many other companies, I had to figure out a different way to deliver my service, to deliver my product. And somebody reached out to me and said, "Would you like to be a guest on my podcast?" And honest, Fabio, this is exactly the way it happened. And I said, "Sure. What's a podcast?" I had no idea what a podcast was. And they explained it to me. And I said, "Okay, I'll try it. I'll do it." Fabio, I was so nervous. I was so scared. I didn't know what I didn't know. So I had Post-it notes all around the camera with
Right.
different answers to questions. And the person asked me a question, and I'd kind of lean in and I'd read the Post-it note. I was horrible. I was terrible at being a podcast guest. But then I had this conversation with the publisher of my book. And I said to him, I listen to every podcast I've ever been on to try to get better, to try to have better stories, tighter stories, not say or huh, because I want to be a better guest for the host. And he said, no, Terry, you don't understand. It's not about being good. It's just about not sucking. And I was like, well, thanks for the title of my next
Oh
book,
my God.
just don't suck, But what I told him was, no, I want to be good at this. I want to be the best I can for the host that's allowing me to come on their show and spend time. So I started out doing podcasts, and now I've done well over 600 podcasts around the world. I'm starting to speak again to groups and tell my story and try to teach the lessons that I've learned. And so that now is my purpose. That's what I will do until I think God tells me either to do something else or tells me it's time to come home and come off this world. So that's kind of where I am right now.
Beautiful. Well, if I can say, some time ago I did this recording with another guest, but my registration was very bad, so I had a technical problem. And when I closed of course, the experience wasn't maybe great for both. But when I closed the recording and then I talk with my fiance, I say, "Listen, unfortunately, it wasn't very good because of this, and this." And she said to me, "But why you are sad?" "Because I wanted to give the best experience to the guest, and that I didn't do." So this also makes me think about it, like what you say to me before, so that you are also like me. So you want to give the best experience to the host. So when these two people collaborate each other, to have a good conversation, to make the environment powerful and beautiful, then you give the best experience to the target, to the audience, right?
Right.
And of course, doesn't work every time because we are human. It's normal, and we have a technical problem, and sometimes we are distracted, whatever. And it's also beautiful and nice to not make feel guilty each other, because as I say, we are human. That's who we are basically. But let's say that when guest and host collaborate each other for the best experience ever, then comes something very beautiful, and that's something that is happening right now with us, in my opinion. So yeah,
I think so. And I like I said, I've done 600 podcasts all around the world, and I've yet to have a bad experience with a host. I've yet to have, we didn't mesh or we didn't get together, and that has been something that's very powerful for me because, as somebody with tumors in my lungs, going out and being around people is hard for me. It's difficult with my amputation, but it's hard to, expose myself to potential COVID or a flu or something like that. So having these interactions via, Skype or Riverside or Zoom or whatever it ends up being has been very therapeutic for me to be able to interact with people in this way.
Keep going then. Yeah,
I am.
Well, Terry, listen, thank you so much for everything, for sharing your story with us. So this piece of story in my show is truly valuable for people who are facing the same fate. And you give to them the strength to continue, the strength to fight. And that's what you're doing right now. And as I can see, it's so powerful. I can actually say a miracle. And that's very beautiful, truly.
Well, and Fabio, thanks for having me on. It was great talking to you. And thanks for the platform to hopefully our conversation will make a positive difference in the members of your audience. And if it does, then today's been a good day.
I'm sure it will. And is there anything else to add before to conclude? Tell me, Terry.
You know what? Let me tell you a quick story, if I may.
Go on.
I had a nurse recently ask me, one of my nurses, what it was like to have my foot amputated and to have my leg amputated. And I told her it certainly hasn't been easy. I'm still learning how to walk again and things like that. But what I did tell her was cancer can take all my physical faculties, but cancer can't touch my mind. It can't touch my heart, and it can't touch my soul. And that's who I am. That's who you are, Fabio. That's who everybody who's listening to us is. So, we spend a lot of time working on this body, on this vessel. And I'm not telling you not to do that. I'm not telling you not to eat right and, exercise and get enough rest. But what I am suggesting is maybe spend a little more time every day working on who you are, which is your heart, your mind, and your soul, because this body is going to die and decay. But your heart, your mind, and your soul, those are things that are eternal. Those are things that will live on. So we don't spend a lot of time working on those things.
Yeah.
I'm suggesting that maybe we spend a little more time every day doing that.
Wow. I get it. I get it. You're right. Maybe sometimes we spend too much time, too much energy for this vessel, as you call it, to make this vessel as beautiful as much as can be. But at the end, eventually it's going to die, It doesn't matter when, doesn't matter where. And what it's beautiful to know is that there is something that is going to continue also in the afterlife. That's my opinion, of course. And you have to cultivate this soul in a way to be better, in your next life, or in the afterlife. So, no, it's totally beautiful what you said, and I totally believe it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Terry, and thank you, and take care.
You do the same. I appreciate it.
Bye, Terry. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Here we are. Congratulations. You just finished my entire episode. So, the only thing I ask is to take a moment to give Journey to Success a rating. By the way, thank you so much for being here on Journey to Success. I'm very grateful. Thank you, and see you next time.